I know Kentucky's coming off of a very frustrating loss against Florida, but if the Wildcats win this weekend, all may be forgotten.
You are Locked On Kentucky, your daily podcast on the Kentucky Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, what's going on, Big Blue Nation? Welcome on into Locked On Kentucky, your daily Kentucky Wildcats podcast. I'm your host, Lance Dawe, writer for various SEC-related things, but on this podcast, we take a dive into all things Kentucky athletics. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can make every moment more, and new customers join today and you'll get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. You can visit fanduel.com/lockedon to get started. On today's episode of Locked On Kentucky, we are going to be previewing Kentucky basketball's massive matchup with the Tennessee Volunteers, top 10 matchup between the Wildcats and the Vols. Going to tell you what we know about UT, about what they do well, about maybe some things that they have struggled with so far this season, going to give a final score prediction, and just kind of talk about the future of the rest of this season if Kentucky does win this game, because I think some fans will begin to forgive this team for some of the lapses that they've had over the last few weeks. Thank you so much for making Locked On Kentucky your first listen every single day. I want to remind everyone out there, we're free and available on all platforms. If you're watching on YouTube, would really appreciate it if you subscribed to the show. And if you're listening on podcast, follow along wherever you are tuned in. All right, so let's go ahead and get into it. Kentucky versus Tennessee. Normally, whenever we do preview episodes, I like to talk about what the team does well first before I talk about some of the issues that they may have, and then kind of dive into the matchups from there. Usually that ends up with us talking about an individual on offense that's performing very well, or just how the team is scoring, or what they've kind of done to win some of these games, and it's usually offensively oriented. Normally I don't start with defense, but today I'm going to. Tennessee's defense so far this season has been one of the best in the country. In fact, according to KenPom, my favorite website on the planet, they are second nationally in adjusted defensive efficiency. You have seen this against good competition. You have seen this against bad competition. Tennessee does a phenomenal job of holding opponents to low shooting percentages. They turn opponents over and they force them to work through the shot clock. Earlier on in the season, you saw this in two different games against Purdue and Kansas. Unfortunately, the Vols lost both of those games 71-67 and 69-60, but they were able to hold two of the best offenses in the country to relatively mediocre numbers. You also saw them throughout the rest of non-con play kind of smother just about every single opponent that they went up against, beating Illinois. NC State also got a win over Wisconsin early to start the year, holding the Badgers to 70 points in that contest. They have the ability to shut teams down, even in their losses so far this year. And they've got 5 of them, most recently to South Carolina. They're able to kind of hold their own on that end of the floor. It's been really impressive. They don't have a ton of bench production, but what they do have is experience even when they bring guys off of the bench. This is a very well-rounded unit. They can protect the rim. They're one of the best teams in the nation at doing so, holding opponents to just 42.4% shooting inside the arc. Outside, opponents are hitting just barely over 30%, which is good for top 30 nationally. Their effective field goal percentage is top 5 nationally. This team does a bunch of things well statistically on the defensive end. And it's really interesting whenever you go and look at good teams. Have started to identify a trend here with some of these really good teams throughout college basketball. Most of them are able to do pretty much just about everything either really well or at some solid rate. But it really does impact KenPom's numbers when you are able to rebound the basketball very well. It will impact how your overall efficiency numbers turn out. And your ability as well to get to the foul line, I think, impacts it as well. And it also, I think, helps on the defensive end of the floor whenever you are forcing opponents to low shooting percentages, and they're also really struggling to get to the charity stripe as well. Tennessee on the offensive end of the floor is actually top 70 in offensive rebound percentage, and they're top 120 in offensive rebound percentage on the defensive end of the floor. This is a pretty solid team that does not have a ton of height, but they do that very well. They themselves get to the foul line at a solid clip, and they force their opponents to earn 23% of their points from the charity stripe, which is a very high number. They do not allow a ton from inside the arc, and when they do have shot attempts go up against them, they're either fouling or contesting without fouling and pulling down a defensive rebound. This is a very well-coached, sound, it's a really, really good, disciplined team on the defensive end of the floor. The guy that you're looking at the guard position that I think is arguably their best defender, has been since he started playing college just a couple of years ago, Zakai Ziegler. Only 5'9", 170 pounds, but he has been a force to be reckoned with. He leads the team in steals with 1.6 per game. Tennessee as a team averages 8 per contest. Josiah Jordan-James also averages over 1 steal per contest. Everybody forgets about the fact that Santiago Vescovi is still on this team, despite, I think this may actually be his 6th season. I'm not pulling a bit here. He's been in college basketball for quite some time. Jordan Gainey is averaging over a steal per contest. Jemai Meshack, who can really light it up from deep for them, is also averaging a steal per contest. They have some really solid guards that can turn you over and create havoc. On the offensive end of the floor, they're not as strong, but they're still pretty darn good. They're top 35 nationally in adjusted efficiency on offense. Their tempo is pretty fast. They like to play with some pace. They lean on the free throw line and the three-point shot more than they do inside the arc, and they're not statistically terrible from 3 or from the foul line. They're actually pretty good from the charity stripe, shooting 75%. It's a well-rounded unit. When you look at Tennessee, it's a well-rounded unit. They don't turn the ball over. Again, like I said, they rebound the basketball. They get second chance points. Their effective field goal percentage is okay. They don't turn the ball over outside of steals a ton. When they do have some steal issues, they've had some steal issues, I should say, at various points in this season. They distribute the basketball well. They're top 15 in assists per field goals made. They average almost 17 assists per contest. It's just a good, solid team that plays very, very hard defense. The guy that has been leading them so far this season is Dalton Knecht. Knecht, don't know how to pronounce it. All I know is that this dude is a baller. He transferred in last season from Northern Colorado. He was there at Northern Colorado for 2 seasons before he went to the Vols, and he is currently averaging 20 points per game, 4.6 rebounds, almost 2 assists per contest, while shooting 48.8% from the floor and 40% from deep. This kid is a baller, no questions asked. At 6'6", he's a solid shooting guard, wing type that can also play a little bit of defense as well. I think it's interesting to note that right now the Vols are averaging almost 79 points per game, 20 of those coming from Dalton Knecht. No other player on this roster is averaging more than 12 points per game. If you look up and down their rotation, they've got, let's see here, they've got 8 guys that they use primarily, and then they've got a 9th guy that they can go to on occasion in Toby Akawa, who has played 9 games for them. And all of their different scores, from Zakai Ziegler to Akawa, are averaging somewhere between 9.8 to 4.7 points per game. They've got a lot of different guys that can contribute on any given night, but they're not going to necessarily explode. I think Jonas Adu, who is the only other player on this roster averaging double figures at 11.6 points per contest, he's got some ability to play solidly down low for UT, also averaging 7.3 rebounds. Will be interesting to see the matchup between him and Ugonna Onyenso and Trey Mitchell. Will Onyenso be able to consistently get those blocks like he did against Florida, or will maybe the Wildcats have a little bit of a tougher time slowing down Tennessee's offense inside? They're not overly reliant on it, But if it's an aspect of the game you can shut down, you'll absolutely take that. But again, Jordan Gainey, Santiago Vescovi, two really solid guards that are averaging over 18 minutes per game alongside Jemai Mashak, who is shooting almost 40% from beyond the arc. They've just got a good, well-rounded team with a stud player at the top. In fact, if you go and look on KenPom, there is a KenPom Player of the Year statistic that you can go and check out, and you can see through a rating that he breaks down on his website, who essentially is the most valuable player in all of college basketball. There are 3 different players in the top 10 from the SEC. Janai Broome from Auburn is number 4. Mark Sears from Alabama is number 10. Dalton Knecht from Tennessee is number 7 in the KenPom Player of the Year standings. He gets the ball quite a bit. He takes a lot of shots whenever he is on the floor. He's got a really solid true shooting percentage at 60%. He's very, very effective for the Volunteers at that small forward, occasionally shooting guard position. This is a team that plays, again, hard on both sides of the ball, and it's just balanced. But on occasion, they have had some issues scoring, and so therefore it's led to their demise in a couple of different games. I want to talk about 2 of the most recent games that they have struggled in, where not everything has necessarily gone right for, I think, one of the better teams in the entire country. I want to break down what this means, how exactly Kentucky may be able to attack the Tennessee Volunteers. Is this a good matchup? Going to talk about all of those things in just a second. Before I do that, though, I want to tell you guys about our friends over at FanDuel. Happy Super Bowl to all those who celebrate from FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. If you're like me, Super Bowl Sunday is all about scoring the best seat on the couch, grabbing some snacks, getting some friends, and placing some super awesome bets. And FanDuel has so many different ways for you to end the season with a W or 2 or 3, depending on how you want to play it, because not only can you bet on who will win Super Bowl 58, but FanDuel also has bets for which players will score a touchdown. You can bet on both teams and see who you think would bet a touchdown. Maybe you want to go for somebody like Christian McCaffrey or maybe Deebo Samuel running one in early to start this contest. If you don't believe in Brock Purdy throwing it through the air, you can also bet on how many points will be scored in this contest. Will it be high scoring? Will it be low scoring, like the Chiefs-Ravens game just a week or so ago? They've got so many more different ways to bet on top of that. So new customers, if you join today, you'll get $200 in bonus bets with your first bet of $5 or more wins. All you have to do is go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. Again, that is FanDuel.com/lockedon. You can make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, continuing along here on the Friday edition of Locked On Kentucky. Lance Dawe hanging out here with you. Again, I really appreciate you guys checking out Locked On Kentucky today. If you're a returning subscriber, I appreciate you tuning in, whether that be on YouTube or on podcast. And if you're new to the channel, maybe you've watched a few episodes recently but haven't subscribed, please subscribe to the show and let me know what you think about the team in the comments below. Let me know what you think about Kentucky as a whole. I know we've talked a lot about their defensive struggles as of late. We've talked about some of the things that they could be doing better at the guard position, even though they've got some really good players there. Let me know all of your thoughts in the comments below. Okay, so we've got some thoughts here about some of the things that Tennessee doesn't necessarily do well. And I know that they are a very well-rounded team, and they're really, really good on defense. But on occasion, they have struggled to score the basketball. Obviously, we talked about those 2 games earlier against Purdue and Kansas. While the defense was good, holding 2 of the better offenses in the country to mediocre numbers, Tennessee themselves was not able to get it done, scoring only 60 against the Jayhawks and 67 against the Boilermakers. I want to talk here about the 2 more recent losses that that Tennessee had. By the way, they're sandwiched in between Purdue, Kansas, Mississippi State, South Carolina, is a loss to North Carolina, where they lost 100-92, and they just simply gave up a lot of points on the charity stripe, and that was kind of it. They also gave up 12 3-pointers, which will hurt anyone in any contest, as Kentucky has learned as of late. But the 2 more recent losses to Mississippi State and South Carolina, 2 teams inside the top 50 on KenPom as of right now. The most recent game that Tennessee has played was that 63-59 loss at home to South Carolina. In a game where Tennessee struggled to shoot the basketball, only shooting 5 of 21 from beyond the arc. Dalton Knecht still going 8 of 16 from the floor and having 31 points. Shooting 43% from the floor as a whole. Grabbing 9 offensive rebounds, grabbing 28 defensive rebounds, as opposed to South Carolina's 9 and 31. Didn't really distribute the basketball well, only had 11 assists. That's like 5 or 6 underneath their average. Didn't turn the ball over a ton, only had 6 turnovers. But the issue was just the fact that they, outside of Knecht, nobody stepped up. Nobody stepped up. They struggled to shoot from the floor, and they struggled to shoot from beyond the arc. And South Carolina did just enough to gut out a win. South Carolina didn't shoot that well either, only shooting 33% from inside the arc. But they hit 10 three-pointers, and they were also significantly more efficient from the charity stripe. Shout out BJ Mack, their 6'8", 270-pound senior, going 7 of 8 from the foul line. South Carolina was more well-balanced, and they were able to execute better in the closing moments of an ugly game, hitting their three-point shots when it mattered, and playing good defense themselves. Tennessee has their one stud, but the supporting cast did not step up and help him. Go and look at that game against Mississippi State, 77-72. Tennessee shot 63% from inside the arc. That's really good. But only 27% from outside. 8 of 29. Dalton Knecht and Zakai Ziegler both went 4 of 9 from beyond the arc. That's really good. Both of them had 28 and 26 points. Nobody else on the roster hit a three-point shot. 4 other players attempted a three-point shot. 3 of them shot at least 3, and none of them made an outside shot. Nobody had more than 9 points outside of Ziegler and Knecht. Then you go and look at Mississippi State. Inside the arc, they shot 58%. Outside the arc, they shot 33%. Didn't take a ton of threes. And they outshot Tennessee from the foul line 19 of 27, as opposed to Tennessee's 10 of 16. At times, Tennessee has been a little foul prone, and they have just simply not executed when the game started to wind down. In both of these games, Tennessee either had the lead or was in the game late. And then the opposition it was able to close things out while Tennessee struggled to shoot from the foul line and could not hit from 3. While there are several players on this roster that are really good at individual things, Meshack shooting three-pointers, Adu with his rebounding, Ziegler with his overall defense, Santiago Vescovi also really good defensively, they struggle at times to close things out. This is a very experienced team that just has not occasionally hit their shots. This was the same issue last year. If you remember, actually, in that game against Kentucky where they lost 63 to 56 to UK in an ugly, ugly contest, Kentucky proved to have the more balanced scoring effort and hit significantly more free throws, and Tennessee shot 14% from beyond the arc. This happens occasionally to Volunteers. This happens occasionally to a Rick Barnes team. And so I think the recipe for Kentucky, as far as victory goes, is to muddy the game up, to make it an ugly contest. But that's the problem. Does Kentucky have the ability, either in an ugly contest that they did not try and start, or in an ugly contest that they are trying to initiate, do they have the ability to sustain themselves? Do they have the ability to grind one out? There are several teams in this conference that do. One of them we just discussed. Mississippi State, really good at that. Auburn, really good at that. Tennessee has at different points been good at that. Can Kentucky win an ugly contest. We just saw them do it on the road against Arkansas. Can they do it at home in Rupp? They gave up 94 points to Florida. Can they bounce back, focus up, and even if this game pushes into the high 70s, which would be a win for Kentucky if they were able to hold an opponent underneath like 75 points. If this game pushes there, can they close the game out? Tennessee's proven their inability to do so. Kentucky at different times has been able to. Now, they weren't able against Florida, but earlier in the year, they did it in Gainesville. They did it against Arkansas. Can they go out there? They did it against North Carolina. Can they go out there and close one out? I don't know if this is a great matchup for Kentucky. Dalton Knecht is a really good player. Zakai Ziegler is a really good player. Josiah Jordan-James, who has also been here for a long time, really good, experienced player. With this being at home, with this being in Rupp, with Kentucky's offense being so good, it's really difficult to pick against them. Kim Palm thinks Kentucky's got a 43% chance to win this one. I think Kentucky's going to win. I'm going to pick the Wildcats to win. I'm going to say they win this game, and they do it while climbing into the upper 70s and holding Tennessee somewhere between 70 and 76 points. I hope. I hope. It's not a good matchup. Vegas thinks the Volunteers should win on the road. And let's just say hypothetically here to close this one out. If Kentucky does win this game, do Kentucky fans forget about that Florida loss? Because let me ask you a question. If you knew these two games were coming up, if you knew Florida and Tennessee were coming up, who would you rather have a win against? If you had to pick one win against the Gators or the Vols, who would you have picked? And I think almost everybody would have said, well, I would prefer a win over Tennessee. Why is that? Well, because it's a quadrant 1 win. Whenever you get to the NCAA tournament, it's going to look significantly better on a resume. You prove that you can do some really good things against a very elite defense, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Both these games being at home, by the way, there wasn't like a huge advantage either here or on the road. I would pick Tennessee. I hope Kentucky's able to do it. This one happening late tomorrow night. Let's see what the Wildcats bring us. Let's see, even if it gets ugly, if they're able to close it out. Let me know what you think about the game in the comments below. If you think that Kentucky will win, if you think they will lose, give me a final score prediction. And let me know what you think about the Wildcats just as a whole so far this season. All right, that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Kentucky. You can follow the show on Twitter at LockedOnUK. You can follow me on Twitter at LanceDawe_ and follow the show on Instagram. That is at Kentucky Podcast. Any questions, comments, concerns? Leave those in the YouTube comments below. Hit me on the socials. I will see you all tomorrow for another episode of Locked On Kentucky. Have a great rest of your day, and God bless.